So he says we've improved lives of Ghanaians compared to Mahama's term. And he says that he has indicated what they've done. He says that in the area of employment, tariff increases, business failures, and doomso, they've done far better and improved the lives of Ghanaians. And that's true.
I think you've read all the details, and I don't know which one anybody will want to contest. He mentioned tariffs coming down when we took office. We reduced electricity tariffs significantly by 11% and I think 33% for Lifeline and domestic users. He mentioned also COVID support. I put it that way. If you look at COVID support, the period within which the NDC was in power, we never had any big recession after a pandemic like we had under COVID. During the period that COVID had stricken this country and things were not going, there were no imports coming, no taxes had gone down because people's shops were closed and all that. Imports are not coming, so there is no duties coming through the ports and all that. People were not... So many parts of the economies around the world, not in Ghana only. I always make this reference, that nobody should think that the things we are talking about today happened to only Ghana. Big economies that we cannot measure to went through the same thing. But we did some other things that said some of those economies did not do. You could tell that in Ghana when COVID struck, the people who were working then, the nurses, doctors, we decided to continue paying them even when we were crying that we were not having the revenues that we expected. We continued to give some level of support to nurses and other people we call the frontline workers. These were monies that are coming from the consolidated fund, which was drying up as a result of things not happening the way they should. Businesses had gone down, so automatically your expected taxes and your expected revenues will not come. He mentioned also per capita income. You see, I always reference the time when you compare two things, before and after, then we will be able to tell exactly what is happening. When President Kufuor was leaving office, I'm going back, President Kufuor was leaving office, we knew how the economy was, the kind of economy that was handed over from the Kufuor administration to the Mills Mahama administration then. Within the shortest possible time, you could tell that certain things had deteriorated. We handed over a way more robust, stable economy to the NDC then. Within the shortest possible time, we had this Lucky Mensa, I think so, trying to give a message to Tewia to go and tell Atta that things are not going well. It was less than a year, and we started seeing a decline within the economy of Ghana. Moving forward, the Mahama Emisata administration handed over another kind of Ghana to His Excellency Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo and Dr. Bawumia. That kind of Ghana, which they themselves described in a very terrible state, that I think the meat had been eaten and is left with only bones or something. There's a lot of rhetoric around this. Things had not gone well. By then we could physically feel the pressures within the economy, and that was the time the MPP government took over, the Bawumia Nana Addo government took over from the NDC. People thought that things were going to go worse, but immediately certain strategies came to play, so many things were put in place, and you realize that the economy started picking up. The numbers everybody knows. We took over from around some 3.7%. It rose, got to about 6.7 or so before the 2020 pandemic struck. Every time, I have said this thing everywhere I've been, that we know that anytime there was a major pandemic like this, or there's a major war or something, always a recession follows. Countries that have heavy reserves, that could support and be able to recover from these recessions that always come. Under the current circumstance, if you listen to news all over, they are all having challenges. And they've all been through the challenges that we are facing. How can you compare this to a country like Ghana, quote and unquote, a developing country, that you have had these shocks come, and all the communities around you that used to support you, now they themselves are struggling for life. You have had to spend monies that hitherto you wouldn't have spent. I mentioned allowances. We have to go and look for other fundings. I know my brother will say, oh, but you had money from the World Bank. Was it able to solve all the problems?
So I was going to ask you.
I know you will come there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you factor in the fact that the pandemic you are talking about gave you $6 billion, not million, $6 billion.
I just raised the issue that you will realize you were spending monies that, one, you wouldn't have spent. Number two, monies you did not have. So all these supports that came around that time went to do certain things under normal circumstances you wouldn't have done. The government doesn't often pay for people's electricity bill. And we were in a challenge that if you don't help your people, they will be more distressed than they actually are. So you have to pay somebody's electricity bill. You have to give water. You calculate how much went into the water. You have to give water to people because we had to wash hands regularly and people did not have the water. There are people who cannot, please, we are living in Ghana. There are people who cannot even afford that water, even if they say one bucket is 2 cedis. And because he has to wash his hands regularly and do all these things, instead of using 1 bucket a day, that lifeline gentleman or lady may have to use 2-3 buckets that day. If you don't take care, he cannot afford it. So somebody had to pay for that water. And all these expenditures we were doing, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't do them. He is comparing it to the administration just before him. That if Dr. Bawumia is saying, before we took over, the NDC wasn't doing any better. But they weren't under these shocks. The kind of shocks that we are talking about now, they didn't have any.
The shocks that gave you $6 billion.
The shocks that gave you $6 billion, but you might have spent. He mentioned something. He said, this is what we spent directly on COVID.
Yes.
The rest had to go to support the budget.
Yes.
We all know, it's not only under the MPP or under the NDC. We know since time immemorial, we have had to have donor support for a lot of the things we do in our budget. So we budget for something, we prepare to go and do maybe some support, agri support somewhere, and you have to fall on maybe some Canadian NGO or JICA or those donor agencies to support you. These agencies within that time, their people were dying. So some of those supports that you were expecting to flow in, those inflows did not come, even if some of them came. That's why the World Bank had to take it upon itself and begin to support the nations, because they know, everybody knows the monies were not coming.
Then COVID was good for you, because if all those nations, from what you're saying, they had to focus on their people and they couldn't provide you
with
that
the
support.
budget support that you would
but
have
you
expected.
made enough. You made enough from COVID-related inflows to the extent that you even spent more on budgetary support than direct COVID expenditure, as per your own data in Parliament. Then it means that COVID was rather a blessing.
No, but Randy, the support that did not come directly from, that not go directly to COVID, that came into the budget. 90% of them, or more of them, would have been COVID-related punches that we received. COVID-related. Your money, your revenues you are expecting did not come. In that budget, you didn't see that, the expected revenues, we exceeded them. And for that matter, whatever was left in COVID could have gone to do something.
We have that
else.
data.
But you shouldn't forget that.
The projection and the
actual,
the data is available.
You shouldn't forget that within this period we are talking about COVID, all other government projects did not stop. Government programs did not stop. Kids stayed in school. But the expenditure on kids stayed out of school. But the expenditure on the school still went on because their teachers, even though they were not in school, will have to be paid. We didn't slash salaries of Ghanaian teachers like some countries and some other people did. Ghanaian workers who would have had to stay out of office, and for that matter, productivity did not come. The expected revenues from their areas did not come. You were still going to spend the money. So if in the budget, you expected that, oh, I was going to get 100,000. Out of the 100,000, I was going to spend 50,000 here and push 20,000 here. Once that 100,000 did not come, the money had to come from somewhere. This is basic. And therefore, we had to, whether we liked or not, if we don't want other sectors of the economy to crash, then we have to spend on, or we have to take the money from somewhere and come and spend. So if you remember the rhetoric that the president made, the statement he made that we know how to bring the economy back. We will look for the money. We will work hard. We will do whatever we need to do to bring the economy back. And you could see that the economy is coming back. By the end of 2023, what did we do? We didn't do bad at all, even though we didn't do what we thought we would have done outside if everything was okay. We didn't do bad. So this money, unless somebody is telling me today that when COVID struck, stop everything you were doing, we should have stopped roads, we should have stopped everything and focused. Otherwise, all the things we would have spent money on that we have already budgeted for, we had to do them and still go ahead and solve the problems that COVID had inflicted on us. That is why, whether we accept it or reject it, if I am the president, I will do exactly what the president did. Get the money from somewhere. Let your economy, at least, even though it is not moving up, it shouldn't crash completely to the extent that we wouldn't have anything to do. So he brought the money and put it there. Now, people are asking questions. Why are we still paying this money? Yes, because you've spent monies you didn't have. You have the people who would have given...
Why are we paying which monies?
Like, we are talking about money. Why are we still paying? I know you want to push me into the corner. I won't say that one.
No, because you said, why are we still paying? So I want to find out what we are still paying.
Certain monies. Once we are still paying those monies, somebody will ask you why.
The COVID recovery levy.
But you know it already. Why are you still paying? Because COVID had inflicted certain challenges on you. And somebody says you have 6 billion, like you are saying, you have $6 billion. But the 6 billion you had, you spent some directly on COVID. And COVID had by then stopped all your inflows, excise wasn't coming, locally people's shops were closed. So your expected income too did not come. Where will the money you want to spend on these things for your economy to keep running? At least keep it on life support until things stabilize. Where will that money come from? You have to push, and he told us, he pushed it from the COVID levy into the budgetary support. And funnily, some people are saying, you have the money. These are monies we will pay. We are now fighting hard to ensure that the monies that were borrowed that had to be paid, not necessarily by this government alone, but by successive governments or by previous governments, these monies are also being paid for. You can't go and tell them that because COVID struck, I am not able to pay you now. You are now using the right processes to tell them that because I am in trouble, help me, slow down. But that time, we were still paying. Where are you going to get the money from? You have no revenues. So all these things Dr. Bawumia had mentioned, which of them is not true? Let me now wade into another area.
Right.
He mentioned education. In between 2012 and 2016, there was no COVID. There was no challenge. The economy is supposed to be moving on well. Things are working well everywhere. But the NDC said we will build 200 e-blocks. Were they able to build 200 e-blocks? No. Get Fund records show that they were able to build only 29. Even the 29, the World Bank support was there. They were supposed to build 200 without any challenge. Why couldn't they raise 1.3 billion to build 200 e-blocks? So it should tell you that even when things were not happening, they promised so many things. Now we are all enjoying free SHS, right, for our kids, our brothers who are in SHS, struggling, but we are doing it. But people forget that previously, under the NDC government, Northern Scholarship alone, the Northern Secondary School payments, those ones alone, which was way less than what you are paying now, schools were closing down. Randy, we are all in this country. Schools had reopened and they cannot go to school. Northern schools were not able to go to school. Why? Because they've not been able to pay. This was a time that things were normal or supposed to be normal. And the schools cannot go because government has not been able to pay. Hospitals were rejecting NHIS. So if Dr. Bawumia tells you that you are better off today than you were, now the whole nation enjoying free SHS, children are not at home. The only thing you can say is that free SHS brought bed bags to schools. That's all you can say, which every Ghanaian, every well-meaning person will know that this one is just in the passing. But the point is, when things were normal, you couldn't pay the northern schools alone their free SHS. But somebody is paying the whole country free SHS. It's better now than before. Hospitals are not rejecting NHIS card now, as we speak. Things are better now than before. Look, we said we will give kids laptops, right? These RLG laptops from the past. The few that came were not able to use. He said, I will give you. And they are in the process of providing all of them. Nurses' allowances, you were not able to pay under the Fiscal government. Things were supposed to be well. This government is paying. Difficult as it is, the government is paying. Teachers' allowances, the government is paying. Nobody's salary is being withheld. Salaries are going. No matter how difficult it is, no salaries are delayed.